All right, all affiliates have picked up. Here comes Foxhole. And we're live. Greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. This is a special edition California Governor's Race. I have 5 candidates on with me tonight live, as you can see on the screen. We have David Lozano at LozanoforCalifornia.com, John Drake, JohnDrake.com, Sam Gallucci at SamGallucci.com, David Bramante at DavidBramante.com, and Jenny Ray LaRue at Jenny Ray, that's RAECA for California.com. Welcome to the program, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello.
Okay. This is great. I'll try to go in order that I have it on the screen, and we'll do this kind of like a round table. We'll do a subject, and then we'll let all 5 candidates respond to that subject. It's not meant to be a debate, so don't take pot shots at the other candidate. This is a kind of a let's get to know everybody and see what their general positions are, and then over the next 2 live programs, which will be Sunday night and next Wednesday night, we will have each of these candidates on for a half hour to an hour one-on-one, and then you'll be able to ask questions much more in depth. But for those of you that are listening on either Gab TV, Facebook, Twitch, DLive, Twitter, Foxhole, or YouTube, this might be your first chance to hear these candidates, and I think it's going to be an outstanding evening. So I think the hottest topic in California right now, because we have this recall election going on, the people of California have vastly expressed their dissatisfaction with the current leadership in California. You've been led down a trail of economic disaster, which has caused so many people to leave the state that they actually lost congressmen for the first time in history. And that means that California is losing money, not just a little bit of money, a lot of money. It was once the 5th largest economy in the world by itself. So my first question is, what would you do as governor, David Lozano, to turn around the economy of California and get people to move back?
Well, one of the things, there are so many topics I can choose from to discuss this. I'm proud to have announced just 2 days ago, I made a news announcement in front of my old alma mater that I was, my high school alma mater, that if I'm elected governor of the state of California, that I will be introducing industrial arts and trade skills back to our California educational system. And I was extremely proud to have had with me, standing right next to me in this news announcement, was my actual woodworking industrial arts teacher, Mr. Richard Nicholson, right alongside me 45 years ago. And there we were standing side by side during this news announcement. And not only are we going to be reintroducing these industrial arts, and we're talking about vocational arts, or we're talking about woodworking, auto shop, metal, electronics, plumbing, air conditioning. We're talking about all the industrial arts, but what we're specifically talking about is introducing an apprenticeship program where we're going to be, once these high schoolers graduate, we're going to be introducing them into an apprenticeship program where they're going to be entering into a 4 to 5 year program where they're going to be graduating with a degree, and they're going to be exiting that program with $60,000 to $80,000 yearly income with full benefits and a retirement plan. And this is just one of the ideas, one of the starting ideas to generate into our economy. And this has been something that has been discussed as I've gone throughout the state, talking with people, and they've always asked me, why don't we bring back industrial arts into our high schools and into our community colleges? I mean, this is something that people talk about all the time, and for unexplained reasons, our legislature, our people have just never brought this back. And it's just something that we know in our hearts that we've got so many young people that are just not destined for college when they graduate from high school. They're just not. Not everyone is expected to be a doctor or a lawyer or a chemist or a biologist. They're just not. And these programs with our trade unions and our associations, they've got these incredible, terrific programs that are out there for these young people to enter into, and they're just fantastic. So this is just one of the many ways that I would spark the economy in going in this direction.
I couldn't agree more. When I grew up in California, I took all the trades, welding, wood shop, even home ec. I learned how to bake a hell of an apple pie, I'll tell you that. And what did they replace it with? Critical race theory, and I don't know what else they got their minds on. But all right, let's give John Drake a chance to answer this call. He represents, from what I can see in the picture, probably more closely to millennials than any of the other candidates. What would you do to turn the economy of the state of California around?
Yeah, so the biggest problem that we have in California is that we actively hurt small businesses. We like to let corporations and giant businesses off on either breaking regulations or abusing tax loopholes or abusing even worker loopholes in order to treat them unfairly. And so what I think that California should do is that in the midst of this immediate recovery that we're trying to accomplish, in the midst of this recovery, what we're going to have to do is that we're going to have to not enforce as many regulations and many of the bureaucratic pushes that we normally do on small businesses, and let them create their own jobs, let them function how they need to, so that they can build the economy. The majority of our economy in California relies on small businesses. The majority of our economy in California is small business owners. Corporations, people who benefited the most from this pandemic, should be made to pay their fair share, because the people who profited the most in California during COVID-19 were these large businesses, were these already well-connected, ultra-financial elite and political elite. And so what we need to do in California when we focus on the recovery from the pandemic is that we have to not only loosen restrictions on our small businesses, but we're also going to need to fundamentally change how we talk about issues relating to, I guess, the future. When we want to solve the future, we have to include the future. And who does that mean? That means young people. When we include young people, that means we're bringing them into the conversation. We know what they want. We understand their struggles. We're hearing the things they want changed. A lot of my platform my platform can be summed up in three main points: affordable housing, affordable education, and affordable healthcare, with an emphasis on how it affects young people. Because, like I just said, these are issues that we have to talk about for the future, but we have to include the future in these issues and talk about how it affects them. We have stagnant wages. Our wages are not going up with inflation. The jobs that keep being created are low-wage jobs. We don't have high-skilled jobs that people are going into. So what we can do is that we can create prevention programs that also include these job-filling programs. So like when we address homelessness as a way of also addressing the main concern of housing. How we address housing isn't just fighting it. We have to invest in prevention programs. We need to invest in mental and drug rehabilitation, housing infrastructure. We need to invest in jobs building incentive programs that gives these people the necessary skills to get back out into the communities, to build those communities, and then those skills that are also in high demand, like plumbing, electrician, those things will become more widely filled. And that's at least how I see it.
I agree with that. We're gonna discuss homelessness as an issue in just a little bit, but I'm glad you focused on small business, because that really is the backbone of America, and it was so frustrating to me to watch people who could not buy a suit or a dress at a local clothing store, but they could go to Walmart and buy it, or go to Kohl's and buy it. You're right; these giant global multi-billion-dollar corporations were allowed to do business as usual and basically push small business out of the way in terms of competition. and COVID was used as the excuse to do that. Very good observation. Sam Gallucci, you have worked a long time in this space. What would you do to turn the economy around in this state of California?
Yes. Having been a part of building companies, building job bases, and being in this environment for the last 40 years, look, there's three major components of an economy: companies here, jobs here, and people here. And in every single one of those categories, we are failing. We had 252 corporate headquarters leave in the last several years. 83 of our largest companies, over $100 million a year, have left in the last couple of years. In fact, right now, I think Oracle and Tesla are on their way out. And we are doing everything we can to stunt the growth of this economy. And, of the 120 elected officials, I think only 3 have ever run a business. We have a situation right now that is absolutely appalling. So there's several things we need to do. Number one, we need to restore trust and transparency. We need to rebuild the foundation, because so many businesses have 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And unless we can instill confidence for them to stay long enough to fix the problems, we're going to continue to lose businesses and high-paying job and people. So what do we need to do that? There's several things. Number one, we have got to lower the tax bases. We have got to lower the number of regulations that are crushing 99% of our businesses, are small businesses. We have got to get elected officials in place that have run businesses. We have a lot of attorneys and folks that are in special interest, and we have to restore trust and transparency in Sacramento. I think people do not have hope that it's even possible. The budget itself is suspect to me. I look at this budget that was just passed, the largest budget in the history of California, of some $267 billion, and look at where this money is being spent, and it is an absolute appalling how little is going to help our businesses. Instead of lowering taxes with we had a windfall. Instead of lowering taxes, the money's going to a lot of special interests and things of that nature. We have to recreate the business climate. One of the things I'll do as governor, I'm a leader. I will surround myself with some of the best and brightest and economic advisors to make sure that we start to win again. Start winning our jobs, and I will also do what I can to bring all the various sectors together and ask them, what do we need to do to get government out of the way so that your businesses can thrive again? Each of our major industries, there's unique things that they need to start to kickstart this economy, and I'm going to do everything I can to get government out of the way so that we can be the great state of California we've been. California has an incredible legacy of innovation, solving the world's problems, dreaming, and doing things that have never been done before. That level of dreaming and hope has been lost in our state. We now are the poverty state, and we need to become the golden state again. And this and many other things are what's needed to get this economy turned around. Trust, transparency, lowering the taxes, lowering the regulations, and getting our people's voice back. People don't feel they have a voice. Our small businesses don't feel they have a voice. We have the ivory glass tower, and there's such a separation between the people and this government, and that has to change. And these are the things we can do to start to address this radical agenda and get this economy turned around. We need to keep companies here. We need to keep good-paying jobs here. We need to keep our people here, and we need to give them hope and be as competitive as possible in our economy, that this is the place you want to come to start a business, get our regulations, and get our taxes in order, so out of the way, so that businesses can thrive again.
I couldn't agree more. For the last, at least 30 years, just about every franchise that swept the country started in California. And the last 5 or 6 years, it seems like the Pelosi gang, the Feinstein gang, the Boxer gang, they squeezed all these franchises out. And now California is no longer the source of innovation. It's the source of Silicon Valley. and they've taken over everything. I totally agree, and I love the idea of
Brooke,
citizens councils.
Yes, we have to restore the pioneering spirit.
Yes.
And that's a spirit that I started with in 1981, and we need to restore that and release our entrepreneurs and our young entrepreneurs and celebrate their victories, celebrate those that that are great companies that go public, celebrate the successes we had, highlight them, and get out of the way so that they can thrive again.
You know, it's often said if you can't find a job, you make a job. You start
That's
a company. Right. And lots of people in California, college graduates or not, start businesses, and they are successful because that's the economy of California. David Bramante,
exactly right.
How are you this evening? I know you've also worked in this space, and you've been deeply involved in real estate development and watched the market plunge over the last decade. What would you do to turn the economy around in the state of California?
Hey, Brooks, thanks for having me. Hey, guys, thanks for participating. Yeah, for me, I think everybody's touching on a lot of the same things. I think that California, in all the doom and gloom, and I know it's very frustrating right now with what's going on, California is an amazing state. It's a powerhouse economy. So I really just think that the level and layers of bureaucracy and taxes, they need to be reduced as much as possible, cut as much as possible. I think the government's just gotten a little too bloated, and it's gotten a little bit too involved in so many of the companies that we have. So obviously, small business is a huge powerhouse, but we've got Hollywood here, we've got Silicon Valley here, we've got the Grapevine here. We've got so many juggernaut economies within this state. I think we just have to get the government out of the way. It's very simple. You know, California, I think, still has an amazing spirit. I think people are a little disillusioned, and that's why we have this recall, so I'm excited. And, you know, whatever the outcome of this recall, we've got a general election right after. So, you know, democracy is in full swing here. So, yeah, I think people just need to get more activated, get more involved, and I think people together need to, you know, whatever their interests are, whatever their companies are specialized in, they need to work to push back the bureaucracy and the fees. It's just, you know, the median income in California is not very high, despite how powerful the California economy is. And I don't know that anyone that I talk to wants tons of people flocking to California. I think a lot of people I talk to say, oh my God, there's way too many people in LA or San Francisco. So I don't know that we necessarily need to be the beacon where everybody runs to California, but I do think California has a major branding problem. It used to be the cool, young, hip, sunshine state, and that's definitely gotten battered over the last couple of years. I don't want to be embarrassed when I say I'm from California, despite the economy being strong, and we can definitely unleash it. So I think that California just has a branding problem, and I think that if we can lower taxes for people and businesses, just reduce government across the board, well, then California is going to be real sexy again to a lot of businesses. And I think the businesses that are here are going to grow, and I think those businesses that have left or are considering leaving, they'll just come back. It's simple, you know, simple math. So that's what I think the issue is. Yeah. But in terms of, you know, some of the comments that were made about some of the industrial arts, I actually agree. I graduated high school in 2000, and so in 2001, I was excited to work on cars, to work in a wood shop and, you know, a metal shop. And a lot of that stuff started to unwind as I was growing up. And I think that California is all about dreaming. It's about designing, and it's about building. Obviously it is. We've got Hollywood. We've got Silicon Valley. You know, who can compete? So we're renowned worldwide. We just got a branding problem, and I think it's an easy fix. We just got to cut the taxes and reduce government.
It sounds like an easy formula. I don't know why the leadership of California hasn't gotten it right unless they have another agenda in mind. Jenny Ray LaRue, wow, what a powerhouse crew this is tonight. You have also worked a lot in the sort of the northern metro area and have built a name for yourself as well. What would you do to turn the economy of California around?
Thanks, Brooks. So I'm really excited about what is happening in California right now with the recall, because people are standing up to say that they want to live, work, and breathe in California again. So my background is as a bachelor's in economics and an MBA from Columbia Business School. I've studied economic development. The way economic development happens is super simple. Where people are, growth happens. And where investment is flowing, growth occurs. And in California, as my colleagues have mentioned, that's been declining. So how do we bring it back? I did a data study last year called Population Wars on why people were leaving California and why they were moving to where they were going. And although a couple of folks have mentioned taxes were actually number 7 on the list. Number 1 on the list is cost of living in California, cost of living for workers, cost of living for small business owners. And so the rising cost of living is a result of overregulation, expensive housing that's been underproduced, and a lack of innovation in California, in the government, and much further beyond. So what do we need to do to fix it? Well, we need to have affordable housing by generating supply and streamlining the process. We need to make sure that we have lower crime so people feel that our cities are livable, and an education system that supports the working families of the state. We need lower taxes, lower fees, and lower regulations. And those for businesses will help businesses thrive again in California. We are an $800 registration fee for a business in California versus $50 as the national median. Our business taxes are about 20% higher than our competitive states, and regulations have already been mentioned. In addition, we actually don't have enough infrastructure for growth in California right now. We don't have enough water, enough power, and our wildfires are overtaking our forests and polluting our air. And all of those are both quality of life issues and investment issues for the state. And so a good government right now in California addresses the economic crisis by addressing the things that matter most to people, which are creating an investment platform through infrastructure, and by creating the opportunities for people to have what they want the most, which is a low cost of living, growth in jobs, and the ability to thrive.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the difference between surviving and succeeding is the difference between what you earn and what you have to spend in order to live in a particular environment. And it's all relative. I mean, you pay the highest gas tax in the country. I was just out there a couple of weeks ago. I think I paid $4.75 a gallon for regular. That was crazy. It cost like $80 to fill up a Nissan Sentra. That's what it costs to fill up my F-150.
It's not just the taxes. We're importing oil from overseas. We are responsible for about 90% of the oil imports in the country. Thank you, California. And we could be producing it here, but we have overregulated our local industry to the point where we actually prefer to spend more money on foreign oil, bring it in at a higher emissions rate, and charge more for it at the pump. So we have bigger issues related to those things that you mentioned as well.
Well, I think you have one government organization out there called the California Air Resources Board, and they charge a whole lot of money, and they haven't been doing a very good job of keeping the air clean in California. And they've probably been responsible for more small businesses leaving and not going to California than any other organization in California. All right, let's go to the next question. All of you have mentioned this. Some of you have done extensive work in this area, but it is something that is kind of front and center if you're a tourist or you go to California to do business, and that is the subject of homelessness. So, David Lozano, what would you do to turn around homelessness and get people off the streets into decent housing and allow businesses to open up again without having to get hazmat to clean their sidewalks every morning?
Well, Brooks, as you may know, this is my number one subject, and this is the number one reason why I have chosen to be a candidate here for governor of the state of California. I've extensively gone into this, and so as many of you know, I held a major news conference 2.5 weeks ago in Skid Row, and I unveiled my project called A New Hope. And what I'm proposing here is where I basically unveiled my project, where I am proposing that we are going to be opening up. And again, this arises from the number one problem. And the number one problem is that when your families look at the homeless, They see them on the streets, on park benches, laying on the sidewalks. They're camped out in tents and such. And your children ask, Mom, Dad, why are these people on the streets like this? Why don't the police move them along? Well, what's the problem? And of course, the answer is that the police can't really move them anymore because, of course, by moving them, you're just shushing them off into the next neighboring city. And you can't do that. You can't push the problem on to the neighboring city. That just places, it doesn't solve the problem. It's placing the problem to that neighboring city. And then, of course, then that raises the problem to the home city where the problem is that the home city had to house these people. Well, cities as small as Venice, they don't have the capability of being able to house that many people. We're talking about thousands of homeless people. The city doesn't have the money to be able to do that. So the solution is, of course, is that, well, we need to have areas to be able to house these people. But of course, what is that solution? Well, here it is. As many of you may know or may not know, but Finland has almost solved their homeless problem. They've come up with a solution called Housing First, and it's a wonderful program that they developed years ago. But of course, it's a socialist solution with a European type mentality. But it works great for their country. Our country tried to bring it over, but they through HUD. But they, of course, tried to copy it verbatim, and that doesn't quite work in this country that way. But what I did was I'm an ex-Los Angeles County Sheriff for years, and then I went and worked all over the world. I've worked in Egypt, I've worked in Turkey, Mexico, Australia, Greece. I've worked all over the world, and now I'm an attorney of 28 years. I've worked in the federal courts, and I basically took the best parts of Housing First. I brought them over here to the United States 3 years ago, and I've adapted and put my own parts and created my own project and made it specifically for California. And I've unveiled it now. And what I'm proposing is I'm making not one, but 3 major metropolitan residential cities, one major city in the northern part of California, the second major city in the northeast of the Antelope Valley outside of Los Angeles, and the third major city in the southern tip of California, with each of these cities having an upper and middle class area, but also having a moderate class area with the capability of housing over 50,000 homeless people each. Now, these homeless areas, the moderate area, are going to have their own separate individual communities, similar to what you have these gated communities, similar to what they have in Palm Springs. So I don't know when any of you were last in Palm Springs, but when you drive down, let's say in Rancho Mirage, you have these beautiful gated areas where you have the white walls and the foliage going over these areas with the gated community. But when you go into those gated communities, there's beautiful grass areas, homes. They have some of them have golf courses and recreational areas and pools and such. But these areas would be filled with homes, different types of styles of homes, apartment buildings and such for the homeless. And these are graduated, these are areas that they're going to be graduating from. So we're going to first put them, and they're going to be subdivided, by the way. So in other words, if you have homeless mothers with children, that one particular community would be just mothers with children. We'll have fathers with children. If we have, let's say, those that are recovering alcoholics with, let's say, children, we'll have those communities, and so on and so on and so on. And by the way, none of this is free. They have to work their way through these. And these are graduating areas where they graduate from one division to the next, and we have to train them. They're going to be medically cared for, and they graduate through these areas. And I can go on and go on and go on. This whole project takes hours to discuss, but I'm hoping that you catch the idea. But the point of this is,
I remember when Ronald Reagan made all of the state universities free tuition to state residents. Well, the liberals went crazy. Like, how can you do that? But look at the investment, how it paid off. Once you educated these young people and they got degrees, They turned around and stayed in California, and they raised the entire gross domestic product in the state of California with that education. So it is commendable to say you need to make an initial investment in the homeless, because they're not all people with mental problems and drug addiction. Some of them just got out of the cycle of having a job and paying rent, and they found themselves on the street. So, John,
Exactly.
John Drake's a little closer to the millennial side. What is your take on this? How would you reverse the homelessness issue in the state of California and make it a positive for the state?
Yeah, no. So I actually agree with Dave on this, that I believe in the housing first model, especially the one that's been implemented by Finland, and it's worked out great. So homelessness in California actually costs taxpayers more than just building housing infrastructure and then housing them for free. And so I'm 100% all for that. Besides, I think housing is a human right. Back in the 70s, we decided to commodify housing, and so that actually raised the prices of a lot of the housing, because less units started being built, and so because of that, obviously there was higher demand. Anyway, so how I see that we also have to attack homelessness besides just housing is obviously we need prevention programs to begin with. So younger people, millennials, Gen Zers, and even Generation Alpha, we were all offered, I guess, we were all given the speech that if you just work hard enough, you can achieve success. We were all promised this dream that is just frankly unreachable to the vast majority of people within my generation. This dream is an absolute failure because of obviously the commodification of housing, but also just the debt, but also just with corporations taking advantage of low-skill labor. So wages being stagnant means that we're not keeping up with the ability to pay our average bills. You can work 3 jobs in Los Angeles and barely afford a 1-bedroom apartment. That's not good. And housing, buying an actual house is almost kind of like that seen as a luxury nowadays than anything else. So young people just aren't into investing in things like housing. So what I want to do basically is that I want to create gap subsidies in order to allow younger people to be able to buy homes, but also decommodify the housing market so that it's not seen as a for-profit field, but rather it's seen more as a necessity. I also support things like SB 9 and 10, which would rezone certain areas to allow multi-family unit housing infrastructure to be built. I support the reconversion of unoccupied commercial space into housing. I don't really care about the PR of it. I think it's necessary with so many homeless people, and it's a real issue that we have to deal with like really quickly, because it's just going to get worse unless we have the prevention programs in place, which I talked about earlier, like drug and mental rehabilitation, and then the jobs building incentive programs that help these people get new skills to get back out into communities and fill the job roles that are not being filled. Part of what my platform is and what young people want is that we don't really care about buying homes. We don't want that stuff. What we want, how young people see freedom, how young people see the ability to live in California, isn't so much like, oh, can I say this and that? Can I carry a gun? Can I do whatever? How they see it is basically freedom from want and having a sense of security in their money, a sense of security in food, housing. That's how we see us living our best selves. That's how we see living our best lives. And so I'm promoting that because that's what young people want. And if we're going to just allow people who are either very much older or very self-interested, we're going to have this conversation again in another 4 years.
Oh yeah.
And we see that we see that every single election cycle. Like Black Lives Matter, for instance, it comes in and out of the media once every 4 years. So you had in 2012, you had in 2016, and then 2020. What happened in 3 years between each one of those times? Did police brutality stop? No, it didn't stop. We just stopped talking about it because it was no longer politically expedient. And so young people, I guess, are just so tired of being used as talking points, getting idle promises, for every election cycle. And so what I'm here to do is I'm here to just basically go, I guess, to Sacramento and tell everyone there, you know what, screw you, let's actually fix this problem. Let's fix it the way young people want it. We want a system of security. We want a system that isn't privatized. We want a system that meets our basic necessities for survival so that we can make money and then use it for things like self-care. That's what young people want. That's what I'm here to give to them. And I will also say, because I'm finally on something with Jenny Ray LaRue, I absolutely love your Tech Talk. I do follow it. I do watch it. And if I'm being honest, I stole my fire policy from you. So.
I hate to tell you this, but Jenny Ray had another Zoom. I don't know what could be more important than America Free Radio, but she had another Zoom appointment, so she had to duck out. We're going to talk to her again on Sunday. So, but she's going to listen to this archive and she's going to hear that compliment. So thank you so much.
Well, let her know.
I will. So, Sam, this is a subject that's near and dear to your heart. You've worked on it from at least a couple of different aspects, clergy and legal and economic. What would you do to reduce or end the homelessness problem in California? I like the other two candidates' idea that not just pushing the homeless out of the way, but investing in them and giving them a mailing address to start their job from. So what would you do?
Thank you, Brooke. Well, this is, let me just give a little background here. At first 20 years, I ran a major multinational company. In the second 20 years, I became a minister. For 14 years, I have been caring directly for the homeless. I built an actual organization called the Kingdom Centers that's helped over 1,000 homeless off the streets permanently. I have pastored the homeless. I've watched them die in my arms. I've been in city council meetings. I have understood this issue from top to bottom, side to side. This is an issue that, relative to actual on-the-ground experience of solving the problem, that I have deep experience. I have a book out called More Than Animals. Check it out. It's on Amazon, that lays out what needs to happen. So let's move from theory to reality. We have 160,000 homeless on the streets of California. It's the worst humanitarian crisis in history. Gavin Newsom in the last 3 years has spent $13 billion on a housing first model. And the problem has increased by 24% with $13 billion spent. Poverty has become the new profit center, and crime has risen by over 40%. The reality is that while housing first and treatment first are parts of the solution, they cannot be first. It's a fact. I mean, in the last 3 years, that has been the sharp point of the edge of Mr. Newsom's $13 billion program. And here's what needs to happen to solve this problem. First of all, we have to treat it as a humanitarian crisis. It is the greatest single humanitarian crisis in the history of California, one of the greatest in this country, possibly even the world. We need to declare a major disaster on homelessness and get assistance from FEMA. We need to get the proper resources in here. There's 5 pillars to address this problem. Number one, about 12% is added to our homeless population every year. We need to start with prevention. Those that are on the verge of homelessness need to be helped. I would do several things. Number one, I have a program called a Voucher program. We have a lot of people that are on unemployment right now that are getting checks from the government. In fact, they're so comfortable on unemployment that they don't want to go back to work, and our small businesses are struggling. I would give all of them 30 days, and I would turn that nice unemployment check they're getting from California, Uncle Sam, into a work voucher. They have 30 days to find a job. That job, any one of our 99% of our business that are small businesses, they give that work voucher. It goes to the employer to pay the employee. Unemployment goes down, but it also helps prevention of those on the verge of homelessness. Prevention is number one, stop the bleeding. Number two, those that are living in their cars. We have over 100,000 Californians living in cars today. And I have implemented, and we have seen very successfully, a statewide, a local safe sleep program. We need a statewide safe sleep program to get those that are living in their cars to a safe place, secure place, to sleep at night. Now, while they're there at night, and this is where the faith-based community would love to get involved, you get about 12 or 15 vehicles in a parking lot in a local church or a place of worship. You have security, you have a porta potty, and you have case management, and you assess their situation. It's also prevention. These two populations do not have the mental illness issues. These two populations are where the bleeding it continues every single year, and you need to stop the bleeding. Use these work vouchers to help them. Also use some of the funding. By the way, Governor Newsom is spending $12 billion to expand homeless services over the next 2 years. It's absolutely appalling, that kind of money. And it continues with this housing first approach, which is great when you have a fraction of the size of a population. We're talking about 160,000 people growing at 10 to 12% a year. Prevention is number one. So those two populations are addressed. You stop the bleeding. You address 10 to 12% of the problem instantly. Number three. We have to have a people first plan, not housing first and not treatment first. We have to understand that these are Americans and they're Californians. They're our brothers and sisters. Last time I checked, you can't force anyone to do anything, even if you're homeless.
Especially Americans.
That's American. That's anti-American. Just force them into homes somewhere. That'll work. No, it doesn't work. Hasn't worked for the last 3 years. Hasn't worked for quite some time. Doesn't work. So we need to, in these major concentrations of cities, set up compassion centers. These are triage centers. So instead of spending $500,000 to $750,000 to build a room with granite counters in downtown LA, well, thousands die every year in homelessness. Build a compassion center. It's a daytime shelter, and it's also a triage center where you restore human decency, a place to use the toilet instead of defecating on our streets, where it goes into our water system where everybody's affected. Give them the decency of a shower and a place perhaps to change their clothes and give them some clothes. Stabilize them with a hot meal, and while they're there, get compassion counselors and vet and assess the homeless situation in every one of these major cities. 3 categories of homelessness. Anyone that's worked in the industry for any period of time understands this reality. Number 1, currently homeless or recently homeless, one year or less. Number 2, moderately homeless, 1 to 3 years. Number 3, chronically homeless, over 3 years. That's a general category. You have many ways to do it, but that's a good way to look at it. Those that are recently homeless, you can get off the street in less than a year if you stabilize their humanity. In these compassion centers, you use the work voucher, you use their place of origin, you stabilize their humanity. They will choose to get off the street. Why do I know this? I did it for 7 years. I had a compassion center. It worked extremely well. Read the book. It explains in detail. The facts don't lie. I was able to help a significant number of people in these centers that people thought could never be helped when humanity was restored. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I know what I want to be for the rest of my life, homeless, vagrant. That doesn't happen. Once they get to that place, they can get to a place where they forget who they are, and they truly can get severe mental illness. But that's not the entire population. So that part of it vets it. Those you can get off the street. Moderately homeless, you do triage mental illness counseling in these centers. By the way, these centers can be up and running in 60 days, and you start to address the mental illness there. But it's people first. And then the chronically homeless, you assess how many are you actually dealing with? How big of the population is there? The 4th thing, you need to focus on protection. We have, in coordination of resources, we do a disastrous job coordinating all of the homeless resource services in the continuum of care to really address this problem fully. And you have so many service providers that are on the sidelines. Governor Newsom has pretty much taken out the faith-based component, which is a substantial part of the continuum of care.
Yeah, I was going to say
shelters.
that's what he's focused on, is taking the faith-based aspect of this and almost made it illegal.
That's exactly right. So better coordinating of all the services, and then give the police the resources they need to crack down on the crime. I spent a lot of time on Skid Row, and in Skid Row we have drug cartels, Mexican drug cartels that have planted. We have fentanyl-laced crystal meth that is going around there. In fact, we have politicians that have just been, we had a couple of city council members downtown LA. The corruption they're getting bought off is horrendous, and it's actually hurting the rest of our population. Give the resources to the police they need to get the crime under control that's taking advantage of this population. That's the fourth pillar. Pillar number 5, we have to find large areas of land that we can start to build master plan designed communities for all of the resources. Now, in order to do this effectively, we would put substantial amounts of money to incent cities to that have significant amounts of land to create master plan designs where all of the building code restrictions and all of the service providers can go by right without any conditional use permitting, and also without all the building code regulations, so that you can build the kinds of housing to relocate substantial numbers of the population safely. But it's more than just 2 or 3 zones. We need a collaboration of several cities. You're talking about 160,000 people. And there are many cities that would love the boost, the economic boost. And this is where you invest. And if you build it, they'll come. There are hundreds of very capable service providers in the continuum of care that if you had areas that they could raise their money and put their services and expand their resources, they would do it in a heartbeat. This year, Newsom's going to spend $1 billion on Project Room Key and Project Home Key. That is a nice idea, but it was a disastrous implementation because all of the service providers were the ones that got hurt. They basically are taking all this money and saying, hey, if you're homeless, just unconditional, we'll give you a room. So you had all these housing service providers, emergency shelter, transitional living shelters, etc., that were housing people in programs that were stabilizing their condition, getting them off of drugs. And these people were saying, why would I be in a program that helps me out when I can go back on the streets, get all the drugs, go into a room for free? And what actually happened with Project Room Key is we probably lost about 20% of those resources. In fact, I'm looking at a couple of acquisitions now because of some great service providers that got crushed during COVID because of Project Room Key. So that's a comprehensive program. And this kind of a program, we can address this problem responsibly with compassion. You'll get the Democrats, you'll get the Republicans, you'll get the independents on your side, and we'll address it as California.
Yeah, and I could see it having results pretty quickly. Thanks to that comprehensive breakdown. It was well organized. David Bramante, as you know, Jenny Ray has moved on to another Zoom call. She's not going to be with us for the rest of the show tonight. But David Bramante, what would you do to turn around the homeless situation in the state of California?
Wow, what a tough act.
Oh, I know. I was like, wow.
Oh, yeah. I think based off of my direct experience with homeless, the number one factor is mental illness. And, if you go down Skid Row, it's only been growing and expanding, and it's expanded all throughout LA, through San Francisco, even up north through and around Sonoma. So there's no area that's kind of off limits or sacred to this expanding issue. But I think the main issue that I'm seeing when I went to Skid Row, I think I went about a month ago to do a video on this issue, and I looked up the Midnight Mission. I don't know if you're familiar with that nonprofit.
No, I'm not.
They've been in business, so to speak, since 1914.
Wow.
So they've been working on and trying to end homelessness since 1914. So I think that there's a whole host of issues. I definitely think there is a group that almost is, and it's not easy to say this, and maybe using Sam's lingo, chronically homeless. There's definitely a group that is just mentally ill and they're past the point of no return, and that's a major problem to deal with. And I think that's why a lot of people honestly wrestle with the issue. Do we want the police to have the authority to just put people in jail, put them in homeless facilities, mental illness facilities? It's a real issue we have to figure out. But in the meantime, it's in LA and all these major cities, the first issue that most people are dealing with, it's just a complete eyesore. and it's stacked up to such a level that it's so embarrassing as a society. If it were just a few homeless people, there always have been homeless people, there always will be homeless people. We're never going to hit zero, let's be honest. And the issue though is it's just embarrassing, and we have a lot of nonprofits that have been in the homeless sector for, Midnight Mission in particular. They're in Skid Row. They're in the epicenter of this entire issue, and they've been in business since 1914, and it doesn't look like they're making a dent, but I would love to know how much money they're making from this issue. So, with Newsom just saying, I don't think it was 13 billion, I think it was 12 billion. He's saying that he's going to throw 12 billion at the problem. What problem? What are we talking about? A lot of people say
that's what they usually do. They create a problem and then they try to solve it with money, or they don't know what the problem is and they just throw money at it. And what happens, there are plenty of people willing to spend that money. They're willing to make money off the issue, but they don't solve the problem.
Yeah. So if we looked at any business, and I hate to beat up Midnight Mission because I'm sure they do great things, but truthfully, any business that's been in business for over 100 years and they can't solve the problem's only getting worse. I mean, we really have to take a hard look on it, and it's not going to be a popular thing to say, hey, let's really dive in and see what these nonprofits are doing. But it definitely expands the problem when you have all of these groups already in place for so long, and they make money off of these programs. And now 12 billion is getting injected into the homeless industry. But to me, it's not a homeless problem. To me, it's really a mental illness problem. Somebody mentioned, I think it's on the Twitch chat regarding rent control. I'm looking at all the comments right now, trying to toggle through the different stations that you have, Brooks. And rent control is another issue where the government got involved thinking they were doing the right thing, but really they have not. And they have created a wedge, and I think John Drake might have experienced this. I think a lot of younger guys do. They're creating a wedge, and they're creating two classes. You have people that in Los Angeles before 1978 had an apartment, and maybe they're paying, something ridiculous, like $200 a month to live in Los Angeles. They're getting subsidized by all the new people that have to come in, and they have to pay these egregiously high rents. They have to pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 for a two-bedroom. It's here the government has created a rent control situation where some people, if they made the cutoff of the year, by fluke, by age, for whatever reason, they're now benefiting from just indefinitely arbitrarily low rents for the rest of their lives. There's no sunset clause on these rent control laws.
True.
And they can go up 2%, 3%, 4%. Most people say, well, if you go up any higher, well, then you're going to create homelessness. That's just a lie. Nobody in Los Angeles needs to be paying $200 for a large one-bedroom or two-bedroom. It literally makes no mathematical sense. And then meanwhile, the people that are paying the difference are the younger people that are trying to get started in life, and they have to have multiple roommates, and they definitely are not going to be able to save up to buy homes. But I think the house pricing, John brought up SB 9 and 10. I'm opposed to that, but I think accessory dwelling units, where you add additional units to multifamily properties, that's actually one of the few programs where the government's getting it right. If you have a garage, allow a property owner to convert that to an additional unit in 4 months. That's phenomenal. The property value goes up in LA, $500,000. In 4 months, you can increase that kind of equity in your property. It may cost you about $250,000 to build that two-bedroom. Okay, so the landlord loves it. Now you have new rental unit, and of course the realtors love it. I've been a realtor for, I've been in real estate, Los Angeles real estate for 20 years. So I started buying real estate when I was 19 years old. So this issue is very complicated. It gets merged with all these other topics. I think the main issue is mental illness. I don't think it's an affordability problem whatsoever. I think it's a corruption problem, big time. And I do think that the people or the single moms that are teetering into homelessness, they have to be saved, because this homeless program, it's a rabbit hole that we can lose a lot of people in. And I don't know how many people can be saved. The 160,000 that we have on the street, I don't know how many of them can be saved, truthfully. But we definitely need to be able to pump the brakes out of compassion and try to stop it, because now it's just in everyone's faces, and it's time to get serious about it.
Yeah,
but none of these politicians
I think that's right. I think you do have different levels of homelessness: fresh homeless, people that have been homeless less than 3 years. I lived in my car one summer. I moved to a new city, didn't have enough money for a down payment on an apartment, so I lived in my car and laid bricks for 3 weeks, and I raised enough money to make the deposit and the first month's rent. I got into an apartment, and 5 years later, I bought my first house. So it can be done, but the people that are freshly on the street, those are the ones that are going to be saved very quickly, and they'll never go back to the streets. Yeah,
we do.
Yeah, because
we have to save them.
I had this experience when I was going to high school. When I was 17, my brother was 15. My single mom, my brother and I were living in Los Feliz near Hollywood, and we were evicted. So we were homeless for a little while, and then when I entered into college, I lived in a car too. So I know it's a horrible experience. It's a horrible lifestyle. It's very hard. It's very uncomfortable. And so I don't want anyone to have to experience that. But, so we have to try to have a safety net to try to catch those people before they go through it. It was
I mean,
at
first,
one of the hardest experiences that I had.
At first, it's motivational. But I can tell you, once you hit the bottom, and I think Sam will attest to this too, there's a bottom below that one.
Exactly.
Oh,
there really is.
Well, I do want to touch on one thing. I know it's not a debate, but I want to point out something that John said, which is he wants, and he's saying that a lot of young people want freedom of want. I think it's good to have hunger. I think it's good to be challenged. I think that's why parts of our economy are phenomenal, is when you get your ass kicked and you have to work really hard and you get really motivated, that turns something on inside you to make you a strong, hustling person. And I think that's the kind of spirit we want. I don't want people to have everything for free. I think that's really bad. I think that we can have sunset clauses for rent control, and we can have different programs that wind down or phase into different phases. But I think people, definitely we need freedom, but people need to stay hungry no matter how successful they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me
go
we
ahead,
were talking
John.
about this earlier, that people are not going, that people are not going back to work because it's easier to make money right now on unemployment than it is to pick yourself up and go and get a job. Well, a lot of people in minimum wage jobs are working in terrible hours. They're working I won't say slaves because I don't want to devalue the issue of slavery. They're working like dogs. They're not being treated well. The wages are not matching up with what they need. And so when you're stuck right now in the cycle between, can I stay home, actually spend time with my family, or spend that money for self-care? I don't have to go into work and have all this stress because I'm being abused in this workforce or in this workplace. I think we have to also step back and just reevaluate, how are we treating our workers? How are we treating especially young people when they're working? Because it's one thing like when you said it's good to have hunger, but it's another thing to abuse someone in a place of work, giving them terrible wages in a market that is unsustainable for them, and expecting them to not be sort of on the giving up end of the spectrum, because I like competition. I can totally value the idea of competition. I'm not 100% a capitalist because obviously the system in and of itself has inherently destroyed my generation. But I would say it's very hard for me to defend capitalism when you have these large corporations taking advantage of minimum wage workers and treating them horribly. And so I think if we're going to make a real, I think if we're going to make a real, I think if we're going to actually solve this issue, we also have to go about changing how corporations and businesses treat their employees. And right now they treat them horribly.
Because there's to be fair, there's a difference between capitalism and corporatism. Capitalism basically means that whatever you create with your hands, the value that you add to the community belongs to you. And you can sell it for a profit, and that's how you earn money. Corporatism makes their money off the backs of other people's labor. So,
well, actually, I will say this. I think what you also mixed up is corporatism and corporatocracy, which are two separate things as well. Corporatism is corporatism is more of the economic model that China and Scandinavia use in order to fund their welfare states. Like there's an example of capitalism that
I understand the value of competition, but the reason why I find it so hard to defend capitalism is that there are many instances. So, like, there was this instance in Alabama where there was this group of coal miners who were working at a mine, and the mine sort of dried up. But obviously, coal towns or mine towns, they rely on those mines. So the workers decided to take a huge cut from their regular wages. They decided to, I think it was like a 6% cut. They gave up half their health insurance and I think 25% of their retirement so that they could keep the mine going so the town wouldn't absolutely die off with the mine. And so what happened was that then another company came in, they bought out the mine from the original owners, and then they sort of started striking again. And so they were making more money again. I think it was like billions of dollars again. And then the problem was that the people then asked these new owners, can we have our wages back? We gave them up in order to keep the mine going. Can we have them back? And they said, we'll give you a 1.5% raise over the next 6 years. And that was it. They wouldn't get anything else back. And so I find it hard to defend capitalism at times because it gets so abused so easily. And so
John,
for
that's true. Yeah, but the heart of the issue for a lot of these things that you and I'm pretty sure you and I agree on. You know, we agree what the topics are. You know, nobody's going to argue that the economy is not an issue or homelessness is not an issue or affordability. Yeah. It's just like, what is the heart of the issue? For me, government has leaked into so many things where maybe they went in with the best of intentions, but now you and I, because I'm 39, you know, I'm much older than you, but I'm much younger than the other guys on this thing, you know, so I'm feeling the squeeze, you know, but hey,
I resemble that.
Yeah, it's okay. But, you know, I never bought a hamburger for a nickel, you know. I never bought a Cadillac for $100. I never bought my first home for $1,000. We have inflation problems because the actual financial system, because of our government, is completely out of control. We have way too many incentives that do not have sunset clauses. So I don't know if it's that the government is getting involved in so many things and they're doing it for the right reasons, or I think that they're undermining capitalism. And if we could dial things a little bit back, it would alleviate, I think, the number one problem, which is affordability across the board. Like everything is just so bloated. I don't. But I agree you're saying with the miners. That just sucks. That's, you know.
Well, there's somewhere in between the Four-Bay Auto Shop and the coal mine. And that's the small business. That's the guy with 40 or 50 employees, and that's a small business.
Let me just say, as you know, being in business now for 40 years, what I just heard this gentleman talk about is the definition of socialism. And I personally, this broad brush that the 99% of all our businesses in California hate employees and treat them terribly and crush them and they're abusing them. I just have a hard time believing that 99% of our businesses
I'm not
are in that. But that's what I'm hearing you allude to.
Okay.
Obviously, there's
I see people at Taco Bell smiling.
But the general idea that in general our businesses treat employees so poorly that we ought to do everything we can to I don't really know, to ratchet down and control them even more, because you either release. I believe in the American spirit, and I believe in Americans, and I believe in the goodness of man.
You have to unlock
so
you can't
that's so.
them.
It's an interesting
argument.
But being in business for 40 years, there's always exceptions, but the broad brush that people are treated so poorly in businesses is an interesting idea. I would suggest. It has been, as was suggested, I would suggest that the bigger issue in California is the government overreach. We have more regulations by far than any other state. Those regulations are forcing, and that's the very definition of socialism. And so you've just described to me what I've seen all over the world. You've just described socialism. You haven't, in my history, not capitalism. And socialism is the government so locks down everything, so controls everything, so that's the outcome that I've seen. And I do remember a time when I was a child, when gas was 38 cents a gallon, and at 63 years old, I do remember that. And we don't live in that kind of world today. But also, we have this incredible opportunity to release this next level of creativity, and for your generation to inspire, to build and think and create, be anything you want, to do anything you want. And in order for that to happen, you have to have the liberties and freedoms versus regulations that say, oh, no, you can't do this and you can't do that. And, oh, if you want to start a company, you've got to pay 5 times the rate that that the market might bear, just on the fact that someone might be hurt somewhere else, I'm gonna penalize you.
Well, okay.
But
So
I
will.
if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. But what I'm going more at is that, again, I believe that California overregulates small businesses, and I think small businesses treat their employees equitably and fairly. That what I'm talking about are like large corporations like Amazon who have turnover rates of 105%. Because they don't treat their workers properly, and we don't hold them accountable for that.
Yeah, Amazon is a problem. I agree with that.
Giant monopolies. We have giant monopolies in California, which make up a large percentage of our employment.
Yeah,
pool.
but you mentioned a good thing, John. You know why Amazon is a monopoly? Because government said you can't buy from anybody else for the next year except Amazon.
Exactly. And
that's fascism. That is the core of fascism.
I agree, and what we should have had in place instead is that when we had lockdowns, because for years in California we had this sort of emergency relief fund for in case we went through this giant natural disaster, because for a long time people thought the San Andreas might go, so we had that fund in place just in case. And then and it was also for like another thing, like if there was another pandemic, what happened was that we put our hands into it for every small inconvenience that there was. And then when something like this came about, that was meant to re-stimulate the economy, that was meant to bail out small businesses, what we did instead was that we didn't have any of that. And so the money we did have, we used to actually give PPP loans to these giant corporations, which actually ended up benefiting the most already.
That's right.
And so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like these people have some sort of moral high ground because they provided to us in the pandemic. They benefited the most from the pandemic, and there's no incentive for them to change ever again.
Yeah.
Because the system is rigged by them for them.
Yeah.
We have lobbyists.
I don't think nobody needs to be coming at any of these topics from a place where they think they have the moral high ground, because nobody does.
Yeah.
Right.
No. I agree.
And the other issue is a lot of these these programs. First of all, in my opinion, there never should have been lockdowns. Number one, that's the first government mistake. Number two, a lot of these amounts of money that these large corporations are going to benefit from, they are SBA loans, but they're usually 30-year fixed rate loans at 3.75%. So it's just another
free money.
With another government mistake.
And then they use the loans. Then they use the loans to buy back their own shares off the market.
And now it's just made it worse.
And then they use the loans because it's cheap money, and they go buy their own stock off the market, and the executives retire.
I would say we have, during the recovery process, we have to see what companies took out the most PPP loans, and then over the course of time, we have them pay it back from what they took, because the largest bailouts.
But that's not how it works, because they signed their SBA loans. It's black and white. It's a contract.
Yeah.
So if there was no fraud, that's the contract.
And the idea that large corporations are crap, and that's what they're saying in the chat room too. By the way, my Foxhole people think that this group needs to be running California. You guys are awesome, all of you. But I've worked for the Fortune 500 for 35 years. I don't think I've worked for a single employer that has less than 500 employees. Some of them have 10,000 employees. And they treat their employees like gold. You know what they're suffering from right now? 15% absenteeism, because they're being paid to stay home. These companies can't get product out the door. You can't buy a refrigerator at Lowe's because the company that makes the fridges can't get people to come to work to make the refrigerators.
And that's why we've got to fix these root problems. And one of the things that I propose is doing this. And we'll see our unemployment radically drop when those people that are sitting at home comfortably saying, hey, I'm making great money. I'm making more money sitting at home with my unemployment checks than going back to work. The ripple effect is it's crushing the small businesses. But if those were turned into work vouchers, where I'll give you that same money, you just go to any company, any one of the 99% of our small businesses, you pick it. Pick one that you think you'd like to work for. That money will go to that small business, which needs the money to pay you.
And they need your work. And they need your work. They need the value that you're going to be putting in the system.
And the value and dignity of work cannot be underestimated.
No question about it.
And I don't think people are entitled to not work and just get money. I mean, that's not the American way. In fact, once again, that's socialism, communism, control everything. Nobody has freedom. Nobody has
It's also just
the
not
ability.
even good for the human spirit.
Right.
It's not good for the human spirit. And
It really
we need to get
isn't.
everybody back
like-
to work and get everybody back online so they can dream again, so they can live again.
This is great. David Lozano, you've been kind of quiet over there. You've worked as a sheriff, as a lawyer. You've been all over the world. What do you see as the solution here? We got to get government out of things. We got to keep small business employed. And for God's sake, let's end this lockdown.
Well, I've been sitting here just fascinated by listening to all this, especially the younger candidates here. You know, one of the things I've learned in my life, and I'm going to say I'm probably one of the older candidates here in my mid-60s here, listening to these young candidates, is the fact that my so-called wisdom here is the fact that I listen and I sit and I listen, and I guess that's one of the things in being older is that you learn to sit quietly and to listen to all these incredible views. And I have to say I'm honored to be sitting here with my fellow candidates and to share with them in these concepts and their perspective on things. And if we had a legislature that could listen like this and respect each other's views and collect these ideas and then quietly be able to absorb them, we could arrive at these solutions, and together we could easily solve these problems. Because, I as I listened, I was quite frankly biting my lip and having to hold back in wanting to jump in and say this or that or whatever. But no, I had to hold myself back and keep listening because
don't hold back, David. Come on.
Concepts. No, just hold back and listen to just great concepts because Mr. Gallucci here, as much as I, for instance, in the homeless concept, as you know, as I've been doing this since the 70s, but yet he has such phenomenal concepts here on the homeless that I just think is brilliant. And
thank you.
I would share in my concepts as well. So, as I say, this is just a phenomenal group.
I couldn't agree more. And, we see, especially in the state of California, but we also see it in our federal government, where the executive tends to swing the big stick. And I mean, on the end of that stick is an axe. But they don't swing it to necessarily cut down the trees that are blocking everybody from building something. They use it to knock down their political enemies. And that's all we've seen out of Sacramento for years and years and years. And California, being, I don't know if they're still the 5th largest economy in the world, but they were. They didn't get there because they have great weather. They got there because they have great people. And it's not led by an executive. It is led by the incredible diversity of the state of California. You have awesome farming. You have awesome technology. You have awesome energy production. You got natural resources out the wazoo, wood, mines, fishing, all kinds of stuff. That's what's made California great. what has happened to California is it has been bled dry by the bureaucracies. And that's where to lay the axe, in my opinion. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, the target is the government. That's the problem for California. It's completely mismanaged from the top.
It really is. I agree with my colleagues. And, I think you're right. And I so appreciate all of the folks on this call. All their wisdom is so incredible. And I think this is what we need. We need a group of us, of these candidates running this state, collaborating together, being together in Sacramento. All of us represent the best of California, residents of California. And this recall, Brooke, is the best way to do that, and I just talk about that for a second. The framers of the California Constitution got it right. When you had a crisis of this level, you had such corruption, such fraud, and overreach by a governor and an administration to put this clause as a safeguard, where Californians now don't have to vote for the celebrity or the politician. They can vote for a true Californian, truly.
Yeah.
Whoever will win with 12 to 15% of the vote. The key is, yes, recall Newsom, and then vote for one of us you think can do the best job, and hopefully that is a leader that will. I mean, I'm so impressed with so many of these candidates that it would be an honor to work with all of them together to bring California back.
What a great cabinet. We're building it right here. Guys, it's been awesome. We ran a little bit over time, but I think we needed it. This was a great, great discussion. The audience is hopping. The chat room's crazy.
So someone, I do read the chats on YouTube. Someone's asking about universal health care.
Yeah.
Is it going to be part of the civilized world or no? So for me, I am definitely all for. I'm not for universal health care. I'm for universal availability of health care, meaning that I don't think you should be forced onto a government health care system if you don't want it. But if let's say someone who makes $10,000 a year wants to be on it, and someone who makes $1 billion a year wants to be on it, go ahead. You can apply for the program. You pay a flat tax, and that'll go into a pot where if you need, let's say, a certain medication, or you need to go to the emergency room or whatever, that money's there, and you're fine.
Well, let me clear the field just a little bit here, because when it comes to universal health care, I need to separate a definition here, because I'm a scientist and I really go by definitions. There's a big difference between health care and health insurance. America has the best health care in the world. Now, where I live in North Carolina, I'm probably no more than 20 minutes, if that, 10 minutes from a clinic. They're everywhere. And I can go into any doc in the box, almost any time of day. I can pay $95 and I can get my care. I can get my drugs, x-rays, sewn up, patched up, whatever's got to happen. That is probably typical of what happens up until age 50. At 50, major illnesses start kicking in. Heart disease, liver disease, diabetes, overweightness, osteoporosis. A person between age 50 and 90 will completely exhaust any money that they put into any of these programs over a lifetime. However, only about 6 to 7% of our population actually is unable to pay their own medical bills. Only about 6 to 7%. So there's a big difference between health care and health insurance. I think, in my opinion, it's the insurance industry that's the biggest fraud in history.
I agree with that. But I would also say that because you say that 6 to 8% of Americans struggle paying their medical bills.
Cannot pay their medical bills. Like if you have a medical bill of $25,000, that doesn't end you. You could pay $25,000.
Yeah. But America's healthcare is the highest quality healthcare in the world. But it's also one of the most. It's also one of the least affordable. I mean, the biggest cause of debt in the United States is medical debt. People go broke.
Nope, that's not right. That's not true. That's not true. If we took a one-time, and we paid off all the medical bills in the country. We could do it. We could do it easily without even really hurting the tax burden. And because that's not insurance. If you're already sick, that's not insurance. Insurance is a gamble. That is a subsidy. And there's only about 6 to 8% of the country that actually needs a subsidy. Everyone else can afford their health care. I had a motorcycle accident. I went in and had an MRI, and they said, well, do you have insurance? I said, no, I'd rather not put it on the insurance. How much is the MRI if I pay cash? $250. If it went to insurance, it was $2,500. That's why it's not affordable, because the insurance industry is the fraud. People need to be able to pay their own medical expenses. And they don't really start getting serious until age 50. And by then, you're capable of paying your own bills. I'm just telling you, I know the industry. Believe me, I've been around. My family's been in it for 2 generations, so I know what I'm talking about. Health care is not health insurance. That's like saying dental care is the biggest source of debt. It's not. It's our lifestyles. It's cars. It's entertainment. It's those are the biggest expenses in our lives.
Brooke, I love the way you think. I'm going to have to run. I have another appointment in about 7 minutes, and this has been incredible. And I hope to be on your program again. Just really a delight.
We'll do it. We'll do it. I appreciate you guys so much. Sorry we ran over, but I think it was needed. I think the audience liked it. This is going to go out on archives, and you guys promote the hell out of it, and you'll all do well with it. Thank you all so much for being part of America Free Radio tonight.
Thank you.
Very
God
good,
bless you
Brooks.
all. God bless California.
Yes, God
Thanks,
bless
brother.
California.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Brooks.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
Brooks.
you. Bye.
Bye.
All right, that's it, Earth Explorers. I appreciate you so much for being with tonight's program. And this has been the California governor race, 5 contestants for the state of California, all on at one time. I thought it was very decent. It was eye-opening. It was powerful for everyone. And please visit their websites. I'll put them up here one more time. We have LozanoforCalifornia.com, JohnDrake.com, SamGalucci.com, DavidBramante.com, and JennyRayCaliforniaCA.com. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we'll see you on Sunday night at 8 p.m.